Hello again to all my listeners tuning in. Welcome to Fractured Poet, a podcast for all of you poetically insane individuals who love getting lost in the art of poetry. Podcasting from Ontario, California, I am your host, Katrina Wisniewski, just another person in the world obsessed with words, striving to make sense of it all. During today's episode, I will be reciting expressive poetry, or at least that's what I've titled the type of poems I have set aside for today's episode. Some of these poems have meaning behind them, while others, as I've said many times before in previous episodes, may not have any meaning to them whatsoever. I will be reciting 8 poems in this episode, so I am not sure how long this will be. I will try to make it as long as possible for all of the people who have been waiting patiently for longer episodes. So we will see where it goes. But I will get on with it. The first poem is titled A Thing Called Love. It's something we all have a yearning for, to have a sense of belonging and experience unconditional affection. Some may consider it unrealistic and completely out of reach. It's an emotion that tends to fester deep within the reddest of veins, mesmerized by the flame that burns so fiercely, developing such ardor. It's a growing fondness which manifests itself into something so much more, seeking adoration from another, like an ongoing rapture one could refer to as love. I am not entirely sure what the purpose of this poem was, if I must be honest. I don't even know when I wrote this poem. For some reason, I did not date the initial topic of this poem. The topic of this poem, however, is love, if some of you couldn't already guess. And I'm pretty sure by now, to those who have been keeping up with my podcast, when I categorize a set of poems with one word, I would assume you would automatically know where it came from. Write the poem, which is a book. Whether we'd like to or want to admit it to ourselves, we all seek out love. However, love can also be defined in various ways. One definition may not be the same as someone else's meaning of love. Nonetheless, we all crave some form of love. There is always a yearning for love. We want that sense of belonging and seek out that unconditional affection, whatever that may be. Some may want a fairy tale love, and some may refer to that as unrealistic love. But again, as difficult as it is for even myself to admit it, some people believe that fairy tale love really exists. I can sit here and go back and forth on whether or not fairy tale love exists, but it doesn't matter what I think. Some believe it while others don't. And I could go as far to say that my relationship isn't a fairy tale love. My Prince Charming does not live in a castle, nor is he a prince. But that might be taking it a little too literal. My significant other, on the other hand, may not be a prince, but he is definitely charming. He is a complete gentleman, he respects me, he loves and appreciates me, and I guess you can say that he did sweep me off my feet. Maybe not literally, but he did. And with that comes the emotions that fester deep within my veins, as the poem describes. I felt every single emotion the second I met him. I felt that flame burn from the inside out and was totally mesmerized by him, and still am. The amount of passion I have for him is unconditional. The love we share with each other is unconditional. My fondness for him never stops growing, and there is never a day that goes by where I don't admire him. However, my situation is unique all in itself. My situation was a love at first sight experience. And when I look back at our relationship, how we met the things we've been through, both as a couple and as individuals, how we've grown as a couple, how long we've been together, I can easily define my relationship and love as a fairy tale, but not the type of fairy tale we all know and are familiar with. Of course, we are both, as in our relationship, a work in progress. We don't have everything figured out as a couple. Things happen and we go about them the way we go about them. We grow with each other and we grow for each other, and that is love. Again, love has various definitions for many different people. I can explain how my love story began to someone else, and they can outdo me and say, hey, that's not a fairy tale story, mine is. But this is the way that I define love. This is my personal definition, and what I feel represents not only my relationship, but love in general. Your definition might be different. It varies. Love is about taking chances on one another, though. Love is about exploring your limits and wavering into uncharted territory. We all go in relationships and we all fall in love with people that we don't necessarily know where it's going to end up. Or if it ends at all, it could just keep on going. And love can sometimes be bittersweet, yet on the other hand, it can be irresistibly sweet. My love may not be your definition of love. My relationship may not hold the same meaning and significance or have the same story as yours. It's how we tell our story, and telling that story brings it that much closer to our hearts. Oh, that could be a Hallmark card quote. Whatever. Okay, so enough about my lecture on love and what I think love should be defined as. The next poem I'm going to read is called Ignorance is Bliss. There's not much left for me to do, for I have said what I needed to say. You pretend I don't exist, yet you bombard me with criticism on how I abandoned you. I used to love you enough for the both of us, but now I think I love me more. Remember the look in my eyes, the way I used to stare at you with such bliss, because after today, my eyes no longer belong to you. This almost sounds like a post-breakup poem, explaining the aftermath and going through the emotions that follow, and so on and so forth. I couldn't tell you where I came up with the words or the concept for this poem, other than the poem was written on February 21st of 2021. Nothing about this poem came from that Write the Poem book. It was something that just popped up and I went with it. I can't say that I have experienced this type of emotion, at least from an intimate relationship standpoint. This could have a hidden meaning that I haven't figured out yet, or it doesn't mean anything at all, to me anyways. I mean, for those who are listening, it could mean something to you, and that's okay. But whatever I was feeling at the time is what came out, and I think it might have came out in a different way that I was originally trying to portray it. Or I could have just been listening to a song that inspired me to choose the words I did. For all I know, it's not even a love-like or even anti-love-like poem related. Writing out this episode and putting thought to it, this could be directed to something in my life and the things I have or had experienced. Being criticized by the ones who you thought were close to you, loved you, and called themselves a friend, significant other, or family hurts. This could very well be a poem getting rid of a toxic person or persons, especially with one of the phrases basically stating, I love you, but I love me more type of ordeal. To be rid of someone that is so toxic to your life is a difficult thing to do. Deep down, though, you know it was the right thing to do for your sanity, your own well-being, and there's no one that can tell you different. So again, maybe that's what this poem meant. Maybe this is what I meant to write, but it could have come out as a post-breakup poem or an anti-love poem. Interpret it how you must, to each his own. So the topic of this next poem I'm going to read is based off of the word anger. Here is Uncharted Anger. Ire, a word used to describe anger, yet somehow it remains a disservice. To compose a piece containing recycled phrases, only to define its relevance, creates such vexation one cannot simply bear. Words are meaningless, they have no backbone to the cause. To channel such emotions through words has only increased the acrimony. A fit of rage aggressively builds from within. A personal enmity has officially formed. Full of indignation, I surrender to this unwarranted caller and the lack of explanation, for I bore no malice towards the unfamiliar. Yet another poem idea taken from Write the Poem. This poem was written on April 7th of 2021. I don't even know if this poem makes any sense. To be honest, I think this poem was forced because I just wanted to get it done. At this point, I was trying to write another episode. I already had poems picked for this particular episode, and most of the poems I had weren't written yet, this one being one of them. I think I might have been trying too hard with this one, so I am sorry if this poem was shit and didn't make sense to you, or even give you, the listener, that forced feeling. I do remember getting tired, and for all I know, I could have, I don't know, just half-assed it, and that could have been the reason why I feel a sense of shittery towards this poem. I probably wanted to get this poem done so bad that I just forced in the words that were already provided for me. And if that's the case, again, I am sorry. I just put you guys through the ringer. Maybe I might rewrite this poem later when I come across it next and feature it again on this podcast, or I might just say fuck it and just forget it even exists. Whatever. This could have been just a gibberish poem too. The poem, though, on a serious note, refers to how the word anger itself and words like it don't explain or express the actual emotion. Developing frustration and even anger for that reason alone. And I hope I just made sense with that, because I don't even know if that made sense. But when I wrote this poem portion of the podcast, it was almost 3 a.m. too. So yeah, I might have been typing a shit ton of gibberish. However, maybe not. I know I have touched on this subject of how I have thought about where words came from and why they have the definitions they do. How does one come up with the words we use? Why do they mean what they mean? I guess that's a direction I was going in with this poem and the word anger. When someone explains or expresses anger, I guess it's in the tone of that person's voice and even actions that lets the other person or people know the amount of anger that is being experienced. It's all in the voice. You start to feel the frustration in the middle of the poem because it's a difficult thing to grasp. Getting angry over the lack of meaning in the word anger. Sounds stupid, I know, but it's the direction I went in with this poem for whatever freaking reason. The last few lines of the poem, I think the person sort of surrendered to their emotions and realized that their anger was unwarranted and pointless. A pointless argument that doesn't deserve a second glance. Just agree to disagree and move on. All right, I will now recite another poem. This one does not have a title, though. There are things I know I shouldn't remember, things I cannot seem to forget. Living my days with a clear mind is impossible to achieve, bombarded with overflowing convictions. I am just another burning ember amongst the wind, floating about, carrying chaos everywhere I go. My thoughts are toxic. They burn from the inside out. I can no longer control the outcome, for my thoughts have turned to ash, slowly falling to their death, burning down everything in its path. This poem was written on 2 separate days. I started writing this poem on April 3rd and finished the poem on the 13th of April of 2021. I am not really sure where the direction of this poem was going or where it went in the end. I do, however, remember that I posted some random phrase on Facebook and I really liked it. And I thought, that could be used in a poem. I was looking at it for a while and all I had to do was just figure out what that poem was going to be about and come up with the words. And if I remember correctly, that phrase was the first 2 lines of the poem. There are things I know I shouldn't remember. I don't believe I was writing about anything in particular or specific. It was just something that popped up and was initiated by a phrase I posted on Facebook, and the rest, as usual, just came to me. The Word document I started this poem on obviously sat for a while because I did not finish the poem until over a week later. Once I started this poem, I had stopped because I did not know what else to write. And aside from when and how I constructed this poem, after reading it out loud, I realized that I could possibly relate to it. Thoughts are a very powerful thing. If you are someone like me who tends to overthink and overanalyze and everything in between, you obviously know that it can, more times than not, be quite dangerous and very unhealthy and depressing. The mind can manipulate almost every situation if someone lets it. I wish I can go long periods of time just not thinking about the things that consume me most. I oftentimes get so lost in my own thoughts, in my own head, that I forget what's around me. Depending on the situation, your thoughts can very well be toxic. They can burn from the inside out and destroy everything and everyone in its path, including yourself. Once those thoughts are put into motion, it's only downhill from there. Those thoughts consume you. They affect everything, and you start to fall so far that it's impossible to catch your balance or even grab onto something to break your fall or prevent you from falling. It's hard to not let yourself go there. It's even more difficult to get yourself out. And it's ironic how the poem I'm going to read next kind of piggybacks this one. So I will move on to the next one. The topic of it actually deals with anxiety, and this one actually came a little too close to home for me. Here is Attacked from the Inside. As dawn approaches, I am forced to live another day, successfully greeted with dread as it creeps its way into my consciousness. Starting the day off with such disquietude, I have become restless and sick with apprehension. It comes in waves, overcome with a fretful persistence. Next to follow is this uneasy feeling. I stand, I sit, and then comes the pacing. Soon, every inch of my body begins to ache, developing a cold chill. I am jittery all over. To explain the amount of distress is unachievable. I have nowhere to go. I run out of reasons to flee. I am stuck inside my head, crawling out of my own skin. Is this what anxiety feels like. I wrote this poem on April 7th, 2021. If you've ever had an anxiety or panic attack, you may relate to this poem very well. I know I do. When I wrote this poem, I wasn't having an anxiety or panic attack, but I know what they feel like, and they are the scariest fucking things to ever experience. Every single emotion in this poem are things I have felt many times over the last couple of years, more often than I like to acknowledge. And to be honest, I have no idea where they came from. I don't know what about me has changed to the point where I have panic attacks and anxiety attacks a lot. Not constant or even every day, but they come out of nowhere and sometimes even over the smallest things. And I will apologize in advance because if I have told the story that I'm about to tell before, you're obviously going to hear it again. So, again, hence the apology in advance. I think this anxiety panic attack trigger was caused in 2018 when my family and I were given an eviction notice with 30 days to get out. I won't say what city this took place in or give out the names of those sorry pieces of humans to which deserve to be exposed and trashed, but I guess I will be civil and appropriate for the sake of my podcast, so I'll shut up. So, anyway, this place we were living in at the time had just hit the year mark of us being there, and the month before we were served, the rent was hiked up. And then the following month, we were given a notice to be out in 30 days with no explanation why. We were not in the greatest financial situation, and considering this was a massive shock and totally coming from left field, we had zero money for anything. Looking for places is not an easy thing to do, especially if what you're looking for and the specifications don't meet your whatever you want to call it. And I'm going to skip a whole bunch of relevant shit, but towards the end of the line is when things got dicey for me. And that was when I experienced one of the worst panic and anxiety attacks I have ever had, if I've ever had one at all up to that point. And I believe triggered me to have some serious PTSD that kind of still lingers today. Since then, I cannot take stress the way I used to. One day I was dropping my mom off at work, and once we pulled into the parking lot, we swapped places. I was in the passenger seat. The second I got out of the car, I had this cold sweat feeling take over my body. I felt nauseous. I remember my mom looked at me and told me that my face looked pale white. I said I was fine, but I knew something was wrong, and I didn't know what it was. All I knew was that I had to get to my grandma's house, which was literally right around the corner, less than 10 minutes away from where my mom worked. Just get to grandma's, I'll be okay, I told myself. The rest of the day, I couldn't concentrate on anything. At times, I felt like I couldn't breathe. I felt jittery. I couldn't stand in one place. I was sitting down, standing up, pacing constantly. My chest was hurting, still feeling nauseous. I honestly thought throughout this entire time I was having a heart attack, and that was probably the most scariest thing I had in my head. I didn't even know if the color came back in my face at that point. I couldn't stop myself from what I was doing. I never experienced something like this before. I couldn't even make phone calls to schedule appointments to look at apartments or places that I had written down on a piece of paper from the day before. I made calls, but I just wasn't there. I received calls, and I don't even remember what happened during that call. Those 30 days was something I will never forget. I didn't know what was going to happen We didn't have money. We were coming up empty when it came to finding a place to live. I thought we were going to be homeless. I remember being at a place I thought was home, verbalizing to my mom that we needed more boxes for packing. I am sitting at the dinner table. I don't remember what I was doing, but all of a sudden, I started busting out in tears, crying hysterically because I was so petrified. So, I'm assuming to try and keep my mind off of things, my mom suggested that her and I go to Home Depot and get more boxes. After we bought more boxes, there was a park-like area down the street from where we lived, surrounded by really old, tall trees. It was really nice, very shady, benches spread out throughout the area. It was really nice. We would drive by this place all the time and always said how we should go there and just sit and take in the scenery, but we never did. Within the entire year that we were living there, we never went here. And for some reason, on that day, after buying boxes, on our way back to a place we used to call home, we stopped at that park and just sat down at the benches and took in the scenery, enjoyed the trees, and even cried a little. Again, skipping other relevant details, on that last day of those 30 days, we were approved for an apartment and moved out on that last day, the day we had to be out. A miracle came at the very last split second, no joke. Anyone that knows the situation would definitely back me up. Something I still cannot explain or even comprehend. I just thank my lucky stars that the people who were there to help us out were there, and what needed to happen happened, and everything was okay in the end. And just writing out this episode, I got very teary eyed because it still burns a hole in me. Even though I know we are fine, I am fine. Talking about it forces me to relive everything that happened within that month, allowing me to feel those feelings again. And I honestly believe after that year and the things that followed, again, those who know me and know my situation know what I am referring to, created something in me and changed me. But yeah, long story to kind of explain where the panic anxiety attacks originated from. I can't even count how many I have had over the last few years over stuff. And each time I have them, different things develop, and it freaks me out more and more each time I experience a panic attack. I guess that gives a little background story to my panic and anxiety attack history. So, this poem does have relevance to my personal life. But moving on and away from that topic, I will go to the next one. This poem does not have a title. I realize now that I was not meant for this life. What a spiteful attempt to kick her while she's down. To live such a life is like a hot dose of venom running through my veins, amplified with the steady flow of ire. My perception of life has been permanently altered, and as the bile rapidly stirs, it will eventually reach its peak, initiating a wrath so unforgivable. Who knew that living could bring such malevolence? And all the while, my aversion to the concept is baffling. This poem was written back in mid-February of 2021. The theme of this poem is based off of the word hate, another poem idea that was pulled from that Write the Poem book. And I guess it's safe to say that this is also something personal. A type of hatred I have developed towards life and its fucked up shenanigans. The things I have experienced and have gone through have affected more than I can even comprehend at times. I'm not going to sit here and whine and cry and act like life is out to get me, because that is not what I'm saying nor implying at all. We all have our things that happen in our lives that traumatize us in different ways, some worse than others. I know things can be worse, so I am grateful for all that I have in my life, and also grateful and thankful for the people I have in my life as well. There are just many situations where I feel as though I will never prevail and move on and up from, because the odds always seem to be against me no matter what I do to try and change them. And I believe that's what this poem is describing. Feeling as though, or believing that I am not meant for this life. Feeling there's always someone or something lurking around to kick me when I'm down. Enjoying every second of it. Sometimes I feel like life is a poisonous venom that is constantly injected into our veins, and we are forced to live with the consequences and aftermath of that venom. I often question life, like life in general. What is life? What is the point of life? Why are we here? Whatever, blah, blah, blah. After reading this poem, though, I don't feel like the right amount of hate was used when writing out this poem. The word choice, that is. I don't know, maybe that's just me. I don't know. I didn't feel the hate in the poem, or maybe it was just the way I was reading it. Anyway, so all right. So the next poem I'm going to read does not have a title, and the theme or idea of this poem is longing. You've been gone for far too long, and I can't help but feel lovesick. Disappearing so abruptly, with no trace in sight, I'm not sure how much more I can take. Yet, in spite of my entreaties, you still remain untouchable, leaving me in a languid state and slowly losing all hope. Why must you be so out of reach? To bear this separation has forced my heart to throb, as I spend my days pining for your sustenance. All I want, all I need, is to be surrounded by your presence, a craving I cannot kick, a thirst I cannot quench. Now, I think when I wrote this poem, I think it was more geared towards a love poem, like missing someone, like you broke up with someone or whatever I was thinking. And I still can't determine whether or not this is a love related poem. After reading this, and even while writing out this episode and reading over the poem again, I can't help but think about the people I have lost, or knowing someone who has lost someone else close to them, and abruptly, I might add. On September 9th, 2019, not only was my amazingly adorable nephew born, but on that same day, maybe even the exact moment my nephew was born, one of my good friends I've known since elementary school passed away. Both took place in the same hospital. As one life was taken, another life was born. Talk about life's mysterious ways. I can't help but think about him when I read this poem. I think about him all the time. I look at his picture, I think about the conversations we've had on Facebook, and all I want to do is cry. The only thing I regret is not hanging out with him sooner so we can catch up from the years of losing touch, knowing that I can never get that time back. I am not sure if that was where my mind was when I wrote this poem. Like I said, I don't think it was. I think my intention was supposed to be a love poem. But then again, maybe I didn't have anything in particular in my head at all when I wrote this. But right now, this moment, I thought of him after reading that poem. He disappeared so abruptly. No one saw this coming. Nothing could have been done to prevent it. And it breaks my heart every time I think about him because he was taken from this life too damn soon. I wish I can take it all back. I had a lot of conflicting emotions going through my head that day and night, knowing my friend was on the floor above fighting for his life. And yet at the same time, I knew my sister needed me too. I saw so many people get on and off that elevator going to his floor to visit him. And I remember hearing about how the nurses and doctors thought he was someone famous because of how many people were coming to see him. And that right there tells you, without even knowing him, that he was a wonderful fucking person and he touched a lot of people's hearts. And he was just an overall badass guy. I wanted to visit him. I wanted to let him know that I was there. I wanted him to know that I loved him and I was rooting for him. I wanted him to tell me that he was going to be okay. I wanted him to wake up so we can hang out and shoot the shit, talk about our elementary school days. And I was so torn that night. You know, the conversations we had before he passed made me believe that he would have wanted me to be there for my sister and for the birth of my nephew. And I can almost guarantee that if he was awake or was even aware that I was in the same room while my sister was in labor, he would have ran me out of the room and shooed me away, telling me to get my ass back downstairs. Something in me made me stall. My fiance and I had a concert to go to for one of our friends' band, 22 Salute, to which anyone that listens to rockish music should definitely go check these guys out. They're fucking cool people. Their music is badass. They're on Spotify, they're on YouTube. Check them out on Facebook, wherever the fuck you can find them. Listen to them because they're fucking cool. Sorry, little band advertisement there, but whatever. But yeah, back to the story. My sister told me that it was going to be a while before she would go into labor because she was being induced, and it was already taken a while and didn't look like anything would happen anytime soon. And I think we were proved wrong because something happened within that time. And she started having some massive contractions. And after those few minutes, she went into labor. And my fiance and I never made it to that concert. Within minutes after my nephew was born into this crazy world, I was checking Facebook periodically to see if there were any updates on my friend. I happened to check and saw that he passed away. I don't remember how many minutes before, after, or during the birth of my nephew. I was at my sister's side the entire time, so I was not necessarily paying attention to the time to even know or recall what time he passed away. So much was happening, and I was concentrated on my sister, trying to soothe her and help her through the process. But the moment I read those words, I didn't know what to do. I didn't even want to move. I immediately went to tears. Even now, knowing I wasn't on the same floor or in the same room, I knew I was there with him. What took place with my sister, leading her to go into labor, I think he knew I was there and somehow let me know that it was okay. About a day or two later, he appeared in my dream. I wish I was able to finish the dream all the way through, but something woke me up and the dream ended. But he did come to me in my dreams and told me that it was okay. And I let him know that I was sorry that I couldn't visit him. And I felt really horrible. I told him I missed him and I wish we could have hung out. All I remember before waking up was him looking up at me and smiling. The sudden separation does make my heart throb in pain. I wish he was still here. I wish I could talk to him. I miss his random Facebook pokes and his wonderful words and our conversations and his kind words and his just random whatevers. I just want to be surrounded by his presence again. Wow, I guess that poem brought out a lot of emotion and a story to go with it. Again, whether or not this was what the poem symbolized, I don't know. But as I wrote out this episode, that popped in my head and it fit pretty well. So I apologize if it got a little depressing. When I wrote out this section, I had to stop a few times because it all came back to me and I did start crying and I had to gain composure. My eyes filled up with tears so much that I couldn't even see the screen I was typing on. But yeah. But the next poem and the last poem of the episode is a little more joyous and less depressing since the theme of the poem is joy. To gaze into his eyes and experience absolute bliss, I cannot help but fall in love. Thinking about him often, a dash of delight brushes over my cheeks, realizing then that I am hooked as I become illuminated with glee. I hope this elation is not imagined, for it has left me in an ongoing daze. To end such rapture would be absurd. It's almost as if I was in a dream, leaving me in total ecstasy. A sigh of relief comes to mind. I have finally reached a level of contentment, allowing myself to embrace these emotions, overwhelming my heart with cheer. So, this poem was written in April of 2021 and it was split into 2 days. I started writing this poem on the 11th of April, and for some reason, I ran up against writer's block and completed the rest of it on the 12th. I think I mentioned before I started reading the poem that the idea of this poem is also from that Write the Poem book. I guess you can say that, other than where the word itself originated from, the overall theme or concept of this poem revolves around my fiance. Just sitting wherever I was at the time of composing this poem, I couldn't help but associate joy with him because he fills my heart with so much joy, as cliche as that sounds. I can't say that I have ever experienced the feelings or emotions he makes me feel with anyone else. The number of years we have spent together have been incredible, and to reflect on those emotions, this poem really helped me see just how important he is to me. I mean, I won't go all crazy with the love like junk, but he is someone I cannot live without. He is quite the catch. I fall in love with him every single moment of the day, without fail. I still get butterflies in my stomach when I look at him, and my mind goes to that very first day. I have never felt this way about anyone else, and that is extremely rare. I wouldn't trade it for the world. But ending on that note, I guess that concludes today's show. To those of you who are always tuning in, I cannot thank you enough for hanging out with me this long. And I hope you enjoy what you hear so far. I hope you've enjoyed the episodes, and I hope you enjoy how long this episode is. It's about 45 minutes. And even to those who are just joining in, I hope this wasn't too long. But at the same time, I hope you liked what you heard and tune in next time. You can catch this and future episodes at anchor.fm/fractured poet. This episode of Fractured Poet was written and produced by me, Katrina Wisniewski. Music by Alternative Rock Volume 1 and Rock Electronica Volume 4 from freeplaymusic.com. You can also follow me on Instagram at Fractured Poet. And as always, thanks for listening, and until next time.